Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. And we are learning earlier today, the Washington Post had this really incredible scoop about whether or not the feds could possibly charge the president's son, Hunter Biden, on really a slew of crimes regarding tax crimes, foreign lobbying violations, false statements, and more. We're going to bring in Doug Burns yet again. Doug, this would be quite stunning. Obviously, president's family member, let alone son, facing charges like this from the DOJ. Fox reported in July, though, according to Fox's Brooke Singman, what the Washington Post is reporting today, that those federal investigators have been weighing whether to charge Hunter Biden with those various penalties and infractions. And so let's talk about these even further. There's this tax-related case, and what's going on there? What do you think? Do you think the Department of Justice has anything on that?
Well, under the Internal Revenue Code, real quick, American taxpayers have to pay taxes on worldwide income, and that's a very basically understood rule. Income earned anywhere in the world, and so here, the claim is that Hunter Biden made a lot of money from foreign entities. And if they can prove, beyond a reasonable doubt in a courtroom, that he intentionally did not report that money on his tax returns, then they could get him on a tax evasion charge. That's what they're talking about there. The second thing that you referred to already was it was interesting the way it played out, actually. There was this sort of wild gun incident where he was holding a gun and then his then wife took it away from him. Long story short, somehow law enforcement contacted the individual who sold that firearm, and it turns out that Hunter Biden allegedly, and this is the second crime they're looking at, was not truthful on the federal firearms form that you fill out, specifically on the question of prior drug use. The third one, which is interesting because you've seen it come up before, Paul Manafort, other contexts, is FARA, Foreign Agents Registration Act. That act requires an individual who's doing basically substantial lobbying work on behalf of a foreign government in return for influencing the American government, has to register with the Department of Justice under FARA, F-A-R-A, Foreign Agents Registration Act. And so the third thing is they're saying that they have a fairly credible potential case on that. So it was interesting because under the umbrella of headlines are often a little more salacious than the articles. Hear me out. I saw headlines that said federal investigators have concluded that they have enough evidence, to charge him. That was interesting. I'm not so sure that they necessarily said that. I haven't drilled into it so much. I like your formulation better, which is federal investigators are seriously weighing those three charges right now.
Yeah, Doug, another part of this that Fox has been reporting is in July, the grand jury looking into this had expired. And so, of course, no charges had been filed at that point. But former, DOJ officials are telling Fox that, even though the government does not have an active grand jury, they don't need that in order to file charges as part of a plea agreement.
Right. Here, now you immediately segued and transitioned into the political side of this and what I would call sort of the political potential backstory. While I always say to you and your viewers that, politics and criminal law should not mix, unfortunately, they do mix. So what may, I think the right, it's interesting, is basically theorizing and concerned, maybe inappropriately, that the Department of Justice, the Joseph Biden Department of Justice, and I'm not condemning President Biden, every DOJ is Ronald Reagan's DOJ, Barack Obama's DOJ, but here comes the rhetorical question. Could the Biden Justice Department work out some kind of very, very lenient deal? And to answer your X's and O's point, if they work out some kind of deal, you don't need a grand jury. That's the point, because the defendant, if they're pleading guilty even to a felony, agrees to waive indictment, no grand jury needed, and simply plead guilty. So to me, it's very hard to handicap, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see if the DOJ really has the political nerve, for lack of a better way to put it, to make him some kind of lenient deal before the midterm elections. I tend to doubt it, but look, I don't have a perfect crystal ball.
Yeah, so I'm just, for my clarity and for maybe for the viewers, who would be making that decision? I mean, would it be Attorney General Merrick Garland? Would it be a lower kind of U.S. attorney below him to ultimately decide whether or not to bring an indictment and charges or not?
Another great question. As you know, my late father, Arnold Burns, he was Deputy Attorney General of the United States. So the reason I mention that is because he very often was called upon to review and approve a decision of a particular U.S. attorney. I'm very proud to say that my late father was the boss, essentially, of all 94 U.S. attorneys. So in many of the normal cases, day to day, you don't need intervention or approval from Washington, D.C. But in this case, A, you probably technically need it because in the DOJ regs and manual, you talk about, relative of a political figure. But B, common sense and human nature. You can bet your bottom dollar that David Weiss, who was appointed by Donald Trump, and you know that I'm not particularly fond of saying this one was appointed by this or that, but it is a highly charged political case. Let's not kid each other. So the point is, to answer your question, very good question, David Weiss's decision will definitely, for sure, 100% be reviewed by probably the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General of the United States before any approval is given to bring that case.
Okay, Doug, we talk about precedent all the time. If an indictment is brought on the son of the president, can you think of any historical parallel to that?
I cannot remember, but you stumped me a couple times in the last few months on a few of these questions. One of them had to do with Gerald Ford. I don't remember exactly what it was. But jokes aside, I mean, I can't remember. In all my travels of reading U.S. history books, I don't remember the child of any U.S. president necessarily being charged with a crime by the Department of Justice, particularly, and let me say this, while their father was in the White House. So no, there's no historical parallel. But then you get into just the from 30,000 feet rhetoric, which is, and it's ironic because this is used by both sides politically all day long. Nobody's above the law. And if somebody has broken tax laws and lying on a federal firearms form laws and Foreign Agent Registration Act laws, then they should be held to account. But it's amazing that when you get into the political discussions, you can throw law right out the window. It's a whole different thing. But from my vantage point, as a lawyer for many, many decades, while the report is a bombshell, the reality is that it is no stretch at all to say that further investigation at a minimum is required on tax evasion, lying on the firearms form, and the failure to register as a foreign agent.
Okay, Doug Burns, as always, I wasn't going to stump you. I didn't have anything in my historical, playbook.
I thought you had an answer in the hole.
No, I was not leading the witness, if you will. Okay, so Doug, thank you so much as always. We hadn't really touched that story, but it seems like it is ramping up, and so we'll stay with it here on Live Now from Fox. Thanks, Doug.
Good night. Thanks.